Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the full council. I am Councillor Rick Jones, Vice Chairman of West Berkshire Council. The Chairman of Council, Clive Hooker, is attending a civic event this evening, and therefore I will be attempting to chair this meeting. Before we start, I would like to explain, for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching, that tonight's meeting is being held over both Zoom and with councillors present and COVID compliant in the council chamber. The current COVID safe capacity of the chamber means that not all members are able to attend physically. And so for this meeting, we have 13 Conservative members in the chamber, myself and councillors Lynn Doherty, Steve Ardile-Walter, Dennis Pennyworth, Dominic Burke, Hilary Cole, Alan Law, Tony Linden, Ross McKinnon, Tom Marino, Garth Simpson, Andy Williamson and Howard Wollaston. We also have 8 Liberal Democrat members present in the chamber, and they are councillors Lee Dinnan, Jeff Brooks, Adrian Abbs, Phil Barnett, Royce Longton, Eric Packenden, Alan Macro and Tony Vickers, as are 2 members of the Minority Green Party, councillors Carolyn Culver and Steve Masters. These numbers are representative of the political balance of the council. Those people in the chamber are sitting socially distanced and are thus permitted to remove their face masks while seated. Please note that formal voting to take place at this meeting will be run via the use of desktop microphones, and the results of each vote will be shared on the screen. Other members of council are in attendance remotely. These members are entitled to speak and ask questions when invited to do so by myself. And can I ask that you use your Zoom hand to make that request? They will also be invited to provide an indicative vote when appropriate in the agenda. The majority of officers attending the meeting and members of the public asking questions at today's meeting are also doing remotely unless they have requested to physically attend this meeting. The officers in attendance, either in person or remotely, include Sue Halliwell, the Acting Chief Executive, and Executive Directors Joseph Holmes and Andy Sharp. Sarah Clark will be the legal advisor to the meeting, and I'm assisted by Stephen Charge to clerk the meeting and by Phil Rumans, who will be acting as the Zoom host. Welcome also to those honourable alderwomen and aldermen that have joined us remotely. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so that members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Can I ask, do any members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Councillor Doherty.
Yes, Chairman. I'd just like to give apologies. Councillor Andy Williams is running slightly late. He hopes to be in the chamber very shortly.
Before we start the meeting, I would like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. Respect for each other as members, representing our residents, respect for members of staff and members of the public attending the meeting. Members across the chamber may not always agree with each other and frequently don't, but I will ask that in our disagreements, we endeavour to always be respectful of others' views. Can I first also welcome Sue Halliwell as Acting Chief Executive to her first full meeting, possibly the only, but you're very welcome. And turning to the agenda now, have we any apologies?
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, we have received apologies from councillors Jeremy Cottam, Clive Hooker, Jeff Mays, Graham Pask, Peter Argyle and Jeff Cant, and Honorary Alderman Andrew Rolls and Adrian Edwards.
Thank you.
I could see Councillor Dillon has raised his hand.
Yeah,
Councillor Dillon.
Can I give Councillor Hunt's apologies, please? He's in France on his honeymoon.
Councillor Barnett.
Chairman, can I also add Councillor Billy Drummond, who I think is away this week?
Thank you. Quite a large list this time. Right, I'll turn to item 2 on the agenda, which is Chairman's remarks. From a year of event after event being cancelled, thus preventing the council chairman performing his usual busy function, things are picking up quickly now, and the chairman and I have represented the council at 11 ceremonies, including Clive's attendance tonight at the High Sheriff's reception. Notable among these were the council organised cycling and wellbeing festival at Calcott in mid-July, the Thames Valley Multi-Faith Service organised by the High Sheriffs of Berkshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire and held at the Dorney Lake facility near Eton. This was a lovely event held in memory of those who lost their lives during the pandemic and their families. This is also a theme which is continued through the Newbury Friends of the Earth Lockdown Woods project, which is also in memory of those lost. We attended the dedication ceremony for the Goldwell Park Wood here in Newbury. Clive went to the summer tea party of the Reading and West Berkshire Motor Neurone Disease Association and appreciated the work done by that association. We both attended yesterday the thank you event for West Berkshire staff at Shaw House, recognising all the hard work that has been done by them over the last 18 months for our residents. And finally, today is Emergency Services Day. On behalf of Clive, myself, the council and residents, I would like to thank the individuals who make up these emergency services teams, people that go above and beyond to keep our communities safe. Every day we wake up hoping that we won't need them, but we know that they are there if we do. We started the day this morning with a 2-minute silence for those who have died as a result of their service, and are marking the day with a video which is now available on the council's social media channels. While strict safety measures were in place in all these events, it's good that worthwhile recognition can begin again. I have certainly gained a good insight into the external work of the chairman and how it is appreciated by our communities. I'll turn to item 3 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the last meeting. I'd like to move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of July 2021 are a due and correct record. Is there a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second them, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Would any member like to mention any amendment to those minutes?
Thank you,
Councillor
Chairman.
Culver.
On page 24, with reference to the motion that we proposed about voter ID, it says that Councillor Dillon said there's no beast of election fraud. I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe Councillor Dillon knows. I think it's probably a typo.
Would you like to indicate which paragraph on 24?
Towards the end of the 7th paragraph. Easier to type the word beast in, isn't it? Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can't remember what phrase I used, but I think the point I was alluding to in the minutes of trying to say is actually that there was no beast of electoral fraud of which we had to act against. So I think I probably did use the phrase almost meaning there's no case of electoral fraud, you know, and so it's no need to fight it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, Councillor Dillon. Are you satisfied, Councillor Culver?
Yes, thank you.
Any other points to raise? Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chairman. That motion has me seconding it, but I think you'll recall that there was some toing and froing in the chamber, and we ended up with Councillor Dillon seconding the motion. So I think that should be made accurate.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Right, if there are no other points, as all members have been able to raise amendments on the minutes, which will be fully considered, I do not intend to conduct an indicative vote in relation to this item. The voting regarding this item will therefore be restricted to those physically present in the chamber. And can I ask Sarah Clark to handle that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I would ask members in a moment to use their microphones to confirm whether they approve the proposed approval of the minutes, or whether they are opposed to them, or whether they wish to abstain from this vote. As members can see, the vote is now being displayed on the screen, and this will happen in real time. So if members can now vote.
They are touch screens, yes. Yeah. I must say this is our first use of this technology in a meeting of this size. So.
I think there is one member left to cast a vote. Oh, it'll be Councillor Williams who is running late. So I think that appears to be that all members have cast their vote. And Chairman, I can confirm that those minutes have been approved.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest on this agenda?
Thank you, Chairman. In respect to the minutes, I think the minutes can be physically signed. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I think the minutes, I don't know whether you've been given a copy of the minutes to sign, but that needs to be undertaken. So I can see that Stephen Child has indicated that has or will be done.
Yeah.
So in terms of declarations, Chairman, I have not received any declarations of interest in relation to any item on the agenda for this evening's meeting, unless any member wishes to raise a declaration from the floor, and I can see Councillor Rolls has her hand raised.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I need to declare an interest in agenda item 14, but just to say that I'm chair of the Health Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Rolls. In that case, we turn to item 5 on the agenda, members, which is the petitions. I understand that Councillor Phil Barnett would like to present a petition.
Chairman, you are expecting me to stand up, I think. No? Okay.
Yes.
I sit.
It's easier for you to sit down, I think,
Okay.
because you're
All right.
closer to the microphone.
Okay. Sorry, I was just sort of so used to standing up, that's all.
So if you would kindly either summarise or read out your petition, which will...
Well, Chairman, my understanding is that I will quickly tell you the heading of the petition, and then I'm allowed, I think, 3 minutes just to give an overview. Is that correct?
Exactly so.
Okay. I wish to present a petition on behalf of residents in Mill Lane and Connaught Road, Newbury, requesting some form of traffic calming in Mill Lane. Mill Lane leads from the Sainsbury's roundabout, passing the police station entrance, leading on to Bone Lane and Hambridge Road Industrial Estate. The residential area is predominantly on the right-hand side. Many of those properties were built pre-war and without double glazing. Although the road has a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit already, vehicles unfortunately travel in excess of 30. In fact, when I was there last night, I would say they were probably in excess of 40. The road is not exceptionally wide. More parking permits are issued than parking spaces, I might add. Unfortunately, the road is also used for HGVs, which causes noise and disturbance. In the interim, residents wish to have some form of traffic calming, but hope in the long term, when the new road from Sainsbury's roundabout to Hambridge Road will discourage through traffic, which is predominantly the amount of traffic that are actually speeding. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. You submitted that petition that will be referred to the Highways team for consideration.
Do I need to present it now, Chairman, or after the meeting?
After the meeting, we'll do, I think. All right, item 6 on our agenda is public questions. I would like to thank all the members of the public who have submitted questions for this evening's meeting, and welcome those of you who have been able to join us and to hear the answers to questions and to ask a supplementary question if you have one. For those questioners unable to join this meeting, I can confirm that you will receive a written response to your questions within 5 clear working days of the meeting. You won't need to present your question as it will appear automatically on the screen, and I will invite the relevant portfolio holder to respond. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question. But please remember that this must be a question, not a statement, and it must be to clarify the response provided and not introduce new subject matter. In accordance with paragraph 4.12.9 of the Constitution, where questioners have more than one question, only their first question will be answered initially. If after all the other first questions have been asked and answered and there is sufficient time, we will answer the subsequent questions. And please note that the time limit for public questions is restricted to 30 minutes. And if your questions have not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days of the meeting. And the responses given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website. I understand that Ms. Louise Coulson, Mr. William Beard, Mr. Paul Morgan, Mr. Alan Pearce and Mr. Vaughan Miller are in attendance in person. Mr. Anthony King, Mr. Stephen Beeson, Ms. Alison May and Mr. Simon Pike are attending remotely. Please note that Mr. Miller has withdrawn his question I on the agenda. Could I now invite Councillor Richard Sumner to answer Mr. King's question A on the agenda. Once the question has been answered, Mr. King will have the right to ask a supplementary.
Chairman, thank you. And thank you, Mr. King, for your question. The roads servicing the Membury Industrial Estate are classified with the north to south road through the site being a C-class road and the B4000 being a B-class road. In particular, regarding your question, this was considered by the local highway authority with the recent planning application for Walker's Logistics. In response to the planning application dated 4th of March 2020, it was stated that, to our knowledge, there is no particular threshold or formula that would provide a limit for how much traffic the B4000 can accommodate, particularly as the local highway authority is unaware of any significant traffic congestion in the area. Do you have a supplementary?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer. If there is no prospect of an analysis of the traffic, will the council carry out a master plan of the Membury area, including all of the impacts on employment, land use, traffic generation, and an environmental impact statement up to the next planning horizon?
Thank you, Mr. King. To my knowledge, we don't have that in motion at the moment. I am aware that there is a meeting to be held with local residents. I think that's next week. And I am hoping to attend that if I can. And I think the intention at that point is that we will be able to discuss all of those matters with all residents that are attending the meeting. We've got senior officers attending that as well. So I can't say yes to that at the moment, but I'm happy for it to be picked up at that meeting if that's okay with you.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. We turn to question B from Louise Coulson. Is she in the room?
Chairman, Ms Coulson isn't in attendance.
Fine. In which case, she will have a written response to her question. Question C from Stephen Beeson.
Sorry, Chairman, that's me again, isn't it?
Yes, Councillor Sandler, could you respond to that, please?
Apologies, caught me out by missing one. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Beeson, for your question. The David Locke Thatcham Growth Study does not influence the housing employment land availability assessment. It's a three-part study looking at Thatcham in the past, the present, and the future. There are several points within your question, so I'll just take them in turn. No, the council does not accept that it is collusion. The planning inspectorate in 2017 have already stated that the site was a sustainable location for development through consideration of the local plan process, and by working in this way, the council and the consortium have a common understanding of what could and could not be achieved if the development was to be allocated for development following the independent examination. Your final point, yes, your letter has been passed to the monitoring officer. Do you have a supplementary?
Not at this stage, thank you. I'll wait for the answers to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beeson. We turn to question D, submitted by Ms. Alison May. Can I invite Councillor Steve Ardar-Water to respond, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your question, Ms. May. There are currently no plans to undertake surveys covering the whole of the district of West Berkshire, as the cost of doing this would be prohibitive. However, we already hold tree and pond data based on aerial photography, and we are developing more plans together with a partnership of organisations across the district to consider our natural environment and relevant actions within our environment strategy. This group will help us to establish what the priority projects might be to deliver our strategic objectives. For example, including an element of mapping work, which may bring some of the diverse sources of data together. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you for your answer, Stephen. My question is, how will West Berkshire Council demonstrate they are protecting and enhancing the county's entire existing natural environment in the absence of actual scientific baseline data? As I'm sure you can appreciate, the absence of factual and accurate data sets provides an opportunity to skew the subsequent performance statistics, which in turn can mislead the good citizens of West Berkshire. Thank you.
Yes, so as my initial thoughts then, Ms. May, are that absolutely, as I've said, I acknowledge your point that we do not have universal data. We are very keen to enhance the biodiversity and ecological quality of this district, and we are going to be very happy to be held accountable to our progress over the coming years within the delivery plan on this. So I would encourage you to look out for more news as we and partners unveil stages of our developing plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms May. Can we turn to question E, please? Submitted by Mr Simon Pike. Can I invite Richard Sumner again to respond to this question, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr Pike, for your question. The short answer is soon. It's due shortly. A final copy, draft copy, was sent to departments for fact checking at the beginning of the summer, with the comments due to be back in the early stage of September. Once we've received those and we're content with those, the process will be continued. So the short answer is it's on its way. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a bit surprised because the web page said that the IDP statement had been produced in December last year, but pending that new delivery, the update of the delivery plan, in the current plan, the completion of Thatcham Northern Distributor Road is categorised as necessary in the medium term, that's 2022 to 2026, to enable development in North Thatcham. Is that the current policy of the council? Thank you.
I'm not going to comment on that without the work being finalised that you've asked about in your question, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Thank you, Mr Pike. Question F. I understand that Mr William Beard is in attendance.
Chairman, I'm afraid no, Mr Beard isn't able to join us.
Fine, so he will get a written response to his question. Turn to question G then, please. This is from Mr Paul Morgan. Can I invite Mr Howard Williston, Councillor Howard Williston, to respond, please?
Thank you for your question, Paul. The Council has utilised the UK Leisure Framework to appoint Alliance Leisure to undertake the development of the Monks Lane Sports Hub, and this includes the completion of the tender process. It is anticipated that tenders will be returned on October the 8th, and an Executive Committee decision is planned for November the 18th to consider the award of the contract. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. The question related to the strategy, accountability, service and transparency, just saying, you know, £10,000 should go in 10 forward. Now I looked up there this afternoon and the question after the person previously, there is nothing on there for the intended forward whatsoever, many tenders. Which I looked at. I also looked at there's something called the
Mr Morgan, sorry, Mr Morgan, can you just please frame a question to us, not a long statement.
There are some on there. There are some tenders on there. For example, it says about the COVID officer. Now, my point is, we're not seeing anything. I can't see anything related to the London Industrial Estate or anything to do with tendering process on that particular project.
What is your question, Mr Morgan?
The question is, where can I find information about tenders related to things related to the London Industrial Estate? That's my question. So I can't find it anywhere on the council website. That's my question. Am I doing something wrong? Is it always not being published?
No, I think the answer is that we haven't started any work on London Road Industrial Estate so far, so there wouldn't be any tenders out.
Thank you, Chairman. The question relates to the Monks Lane Sports Hub, and the supplementary question is now referring to London Road. That is not acceptable as a supplementary question, which has to arise from the original question or the answer given. So I would suggest that be rejected as an invalid supplementary question.
Councillor Doherty.
Sorry, point of order. I don't know why there's a chat appearing on our screens up at the moment. So I don't know why somebody's chat is appearing up on the screen. I don't know whose that is.
Thank you for pointing that out. Okay. Thank you, Mr Morgan. Can we turn to question H, please? Submitted by Alan Pearce. And can I ask request that Councillor Ross McKinnon respond to the question, please?
Hi, Mr. Pearce. Nice to see you. And thanks for your question. Only properties within the council's red line freehold ownership formed a specific part of the contract to which you defer. The properties you defer to fall outside the red line. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, please. I do have a redacted copy of that contract. Is there any chance of having a copy unredacted or even unredacted just for the outline?
I'll have to take advice and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. You actually have the next question as the question I has been withdrawn. And can I ask Councillor Richard Sumner to respond to question J, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your question, Mr. Pearce. Like other authorities, we have been working closely with our software supplier to ensure compliance with the legislation and hope to be in a position that the SIL information will be available shortly. And certainly it's our ambition that this will be in time for December when the next cycle of information is due. Do you have a supplementary?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. Turn to question K, submitted by Mr. Vaughan Miller. Can I ask Councillor Howard Wollaston to respond, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The Council's ambition has always been to complete the development by March 2022. However, this timescale is influenced by the planning determination and the decision of Sport England, which is a statutory consultee for the planning application. We continue to monitor progress with the planning process and will review if necessary. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. I was hoping to get some updates on the milestones for the Monks Lane development, and because the question was asked earlier in the year, in which case milestones were given with dates. I was hoping to get that. Could you provide that as a written answer?
I can provide a written answer. With pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. You have the next question as well if you want to stay with it. This question L. And can I invite Councillor Lynn Doherty to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'm sure you'll remember, but the council back in July of this year, all members unanimously backed my call to offer resettlement to Afghan families. Since then, the council has offered 3 properties to the Afghan Local Employment Staff Resettlement Scheme, but is waiting to hear back from the Home Office as to when to expect those arrivals. The council is working closely with partners, including the NHS, the police, the voluntary sector and others to bring forward the necessary arrangements, and a multi-agency working group has been set up to support the families' safe arrival and settlement into the district. The families will be offered privately rented furnished accommodation with a fixed tenancy, support with school admissions, access to healthcare, financial aid, English language teaching and employment and training assistance, as well as any other help that they may need to settle in the community. I'm sure you may also be aware, Mr. Miller, if you've been keeping up with the local press or our own news bulletins, that we're actually housing 2 bridging hotels. So over the course of the weekend, we've had a number of arrivals, which the council staff here have been working tirelessly all weekend to make sure that they arrive safely and are supported while they're temporarily located within West Berkshire. Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And it's very encouraging. And the work that you're doing and the work the officers are doing is terrific. So I'd like to commend you on that. I would, however, just say 3 families seems a low number. There may be reasons for that, but if you extrapolate that across the country, we're hardly going to be able to support the 13 or 14,000 refugees that have just been extracted from Afghanistan, let alone the people coming in by boat and whatever. So,
okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. And I appreciate that 3 families may seem a small number to you. You have to look at the number of individuals within those particular families. I have to say that first of all, we're one of about 35% of local authorities up and down the country that have actually signed up. And I would encourage all local authorities to have a look at that and make sure that they're signing up so that we can have an equal distribution across the country. And what I would also say is how we're doing
doing this is we're basing it on the accommodation that we have available here in West Berkshire, which is exactly the same as what we did when we had our Syrian resettlement scheme. And there is actually a government portal that says if you have offers of support that you are able to submit, so if you have accommodation that you would like to put forward, please put it on those that portal. So while we're starting with 3 families, if we have offers of more accommodation come through to us, of course we will look at those, but it is very much based on the accommodation that we have available to house families. And I think you need to remember we're a small unitary, there's lots of larger areas, and I think we all need to do our bit. And I'm really proud of what West Berkshire is doing here, and 3 families of X amount of individuals is certainly the right direction to take, but we will do a rolling programme as we did with the Syrians as the accommodation becomes available, because I think you appreciate that we want to make sure that there's the opportunity within the private rented sector to enable that. And I do know that there's support for those families to come here in that way. So it's a start, it's a step in the right direction, and something I'm immensely proud of West Berkshire for doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty, and thank you, Mr. Miller. Right, can we turn to item 7 on the agenda, which is membership of committees? I understand that Councillor Doherty has a proposal to make.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would like to propose that Councillor Andy Williamson replaces Councillor Peter Argyle as a substitute for the Eastern Area Planning Committee.
Do we have a seconder for that?
Yes, I'd like to second that, please, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Do you have any comments?
Ask if anyone wants to make any comments, but I would imagine that we will need to.
No, fine. Okay, fine. In which case, I'll ask the monitoring officer to move to a vote, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In a moment, a further poll will be displayed on members' microphones. So if I could invite members to indicate whether members in the council chamber to indicate whether they are for, opposed, or whether they wish to abstain from this vote. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. We have 19 votes in favour of this proposal. So, and I can't see any opposed or abstaining, that there are now 20 votes. So I would suggest that this proposal has been carried.
Thank you very much. So I think they'll try and fix you, Councillor Marino. How would you have voted? Okay, thank you. That makes 21. Excellent. Right, members, I'd also ask you to note the information on the agenda relating to each of the committees listed in agenda items 8 to 13. Intend to take these on block, merely to note that these committees have or have not met, as usual.
Can I raise a point of order, please, Chairman? On my agenda, it says that the District Planning Committee met on the 8th of September, which was yesterday. In the end, the committee did not meet on that day.
Okay. Councillor Dillon?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Within the agenda, it asks that members note that those committees met, and then it makes reference to the papers for that, copies of the minutes of the meeting, for example. There are no minutes for the OSMC meeting that we last had. So I'm concerned that members are noting that we've met, but have got no idea of actually what was discussed or resolved at that meeting. So I'll be abstaining, even though I was at the meeting of OSMC. I'm not going to vote in this chamber to say that I note it when I don't have a report of the content of that meeting, Mr. Chairman.
I understand.
Thank you, Chairman. There is no vote in relation to these items, so members are merely asked to note. I note the comments from Councillor Dillon. I think the purpose of that is to inform members that the meetings have taken place and where the minutes are yet to be published. I think that needs to be noted.
Thank you for that clarification. I'll now move on to the main discussion items.
Chairman.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Law.
Yeah, it's just a point of clarification on that last point. We can't possibly approve minutes because they're only in draft form. The minutes would not ever be approved of any meeting until the subsequent meeting has actually happened. So we're always talking about a certain number of those committees being in draft anyhow. But I think your point is we're not voting, it's just being noted.
Members, can we turn to item 14? It's a recommendation of the West Berkshire Council Independent Remuneration Panel in 2021.
Thank you. Sorry, Chairman. I'd just like to note at this point that Councillor Rolls, who had declared an interest earlier as the chairman of the Health Scrutiny Commission, has informed me that she will be leaving the meeting for the duration of this item, and that be requested that be noted in the minutes. So I just wish to make that clear.
Thank you. Councillor Williston, would you like to present the report, to move the recommendations?
Thank you, Chairman.
We'll talk to it later.
Thank you, Chairman. I've already moved the recommendations to be accepted.
And I'll second it, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Linden. Councillor Williston, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chairman. Could I firstly apologise to Council and highlight 3 minor errors in this report? None of these has any significant impact on the recommendations. On page 45, reference is made to paragraph 4.10, which does not exist. The correct reference is paragraph 5. The same error is repeated on page 49 with proposal 6.1. And finally, paragraph 6.2, which relates to the future review of all members' allowances by September 2024, shall be a recommendation. Members will recall that we agreed to set up a health scrutiny committee as it was felt that some of the issues were highly technical and beyond the remit of OSMC. Councillor Claire Rolls has been appointed to chair this committee. We also agreed, given the significant amount of time likely to be required for this role and the responsibility that it carries, that the chair should receive a special responsibility allowance. You will see the recommendations for Tier 7, which matches the chairs of the licensing, governance and ethics and personnel committees. As such, I would hope this is uncontroversial and I commend acceptance of this report.
Thank you. Councillor Linden, you have your hand raised, but do you wish to reserve your right to speak at the end? Is your seconder?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. In which case, Councillor Colbert.
Thank you very much, Chairman. On page 56 of item 14A, there's a chart which refers to allowances. And it says the minority group leader received an allowance in 2019-2020, but it was actually only last year or the beginning of this year when the independent pay review decided that the minority leader would receive an allowance, because obviously a minority leader didn't exist before 2019. And my understanding is that the opposition were entitled to an allowance as long as they had at least 4 members. And the independent pay review decided that the minority leader would be entitled if they had at least 3 members. But we voted earlier this year to postpone that and also the introduction of a higher allowance for all councillors. So I'd be grateful if we could correct that document, please. An officer said to me earlier today that their understanding was that I refused to take that allowance in 1920, but it didn't actually exist. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Colbert. That's clarified it. Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It was just to speak in favour of the independent report. Health scrutiny is an important function, and it's one that, quite frankly, the current Overview and Scrutiny Commission doesn't have the time or resource to be able to focus on. And so if one of our members is going to chair that, there clearly will be a lot of work, and that should therefore carry a special responsibility allowance with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak on this item? In which case I will invite Councillor Linden to speak.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I was the last
previous chairman of the Health Scrutiny Subcommittee, and I got paid an allowance for doing the work. There is quite a lot of work for chairman, and I think Councillor Rolls fully deserves to be paid the extra allowance for that work, and also to work with the officers. I would hope all councillors would support it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Linden. Councillor Williston, do you want to respond to anything or to close?
I've nothing further to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. If no one else wants to comment, then members, I will now ask Sarah Clark to conduct an indicative vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Given the experience last time, I'm going to ask members to indicate how they wish to vote in this indicative vote by raising their Zoom hands. I, assisted by the clerk to the meeting, will then count the votes in favour. So I will ask for everyone to bear with us while we go through this slightly long-winded process, but thank you.
So you're now voting in favour of the motion?
Does that mean people in the chamber as well, Chairman? Surely it's the people who are not here.
No,
it's everybody. How careless of you.
I will note your. Do you wish to vote in favour of this proposal? Yeah, so I will record it accordingly. Okay. So I'm still having votes increasing. So we are now at 28 in favour, Chairman, and 29 with Councillor Berwick's vote. That's 30. Can I ask all members now to remove their Zoom hands who have voted in favour? Councillor Vickers, your hand is, thank you. And now if any member is opposed to this recommendation, can I ask them to raise their Zoom hand? So I've seen no hands raised at this point. So the indicative vote would indicate that members are supportive of this proposal. And Chairman, we now need to move to a formal vote of members in the council chamber. This will be conducted via the technology in the microphones. So if I can ask the Zoom host to place the vote on the screen now, please. Thank you, Chairman. That has been carried by the members in the chamber unanimously.
Thank you very much, members. Thank you, Sarah Clark. All right, we now turn to item 15, which is notices of motion. We have two notices of motion tonight, members. Can I ask Councillor Caroline Culver to move the motion relating to an ecological emergency submitted in her name?
Thank you, Chairman. Do I have to say who's seconding it?
I'll ask for a second.
Yeah, okay.
You just need to move the motion.
Oh, sorry, Chairman. Yeah, I move the motion.
And it is seconded by Councillor Masters. The council will not debate the motion this evening. In accordance with the procedure rule 4.9.8, this will be referred to the Environment Agency Group for consideration with a report to the executive, as the matter falls within the executive's remit. I confirm that Councillor Culver, as the mover of the motion, will also be invited to attend the relevant meetings where this motion is discussed in order to explain the motion to the panels. And the outcome of that process will be reported back to the council. However, Councillor Culver Can I invite you to speak to the motion for up to 3 minutes, please?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Firstly, I'd just like to say it's disappointing that, again, one of these motions is being delegated to a confidential committee. I think it would be nice if members of the council had the opportunity to discuss these motions openly, and I hope that in the future that will be considered. I also think it's quite boring for the public if they can't actually watch debate happening and it gets delegated and they don't know what the outcome is. So moving on, obviously in July 2019, we declared a climate emergency, and I urge the council to also declare an ecological emergency because the two go hand in hand. We know that species in the UK are in danger, such as the hedgehog on the red list. And we also know that overseas in places like the Amazon, wildlife is in danger there because of the cutting down of the rainforest and cattle ranching, which increases carbon footprint and also drives species to extinction. COVID taught us two lessons about nature. One is that we were able to go out into wildlife and nature and enjoy it when we were in lockdown. And secondly, the very nature of the COVID virus itself. The more we cut down rainforests and habitats, the more danger there is that there will be a meeting together of humans and animals, and so-called zoonotic diseases will be able to leap from one to the other. I'd like to pay tribute to the council's actions so far with the environment strategy, and also to local people who've been taking it upon themselves to improve habitats in the local area. In my own ward, people have been rewilding their gardens. I have a gentleman who's been making hedgehog boxes and bird boxes. Many of the local landowners have also been doing things like allowing their fields to go over to wildflowers for beads and butterflies, the leaving of field margins for stone curlew, owl boxes, bat boxes, and so on and so forth. We have 2 community orchards and we will have a third soon. And lots of actions happening there, which I think we should welcome. Also want to pay tribute to Paul Hendry and his countryside team for the work that he's been doing with wildflowers across the district. This motion calls for us to declare an ecological emergency, and also to support the Climate and Ecology Bill, which has been proposed in the House of Commons by an increasing number of MPs. And I urge this council to also support that by writing to our 3 local MPs and urging them to back that bill. And also, thirdly, for us to participate constructively in the government's public consultation, which is currently taking place about nature recovery networks. This is a key part of improving and protecting habitats. For those members who aren't sure what they are, basically it's corridors between existing wildlife sites and parks and so on, where animals can move around. It's essential they can move in order to feed and breed. And in Oxfordshire, for example, they have mapped out that land across the whole county. And I think it would be good if we could work with BBOUT and local parishes and local landowners to do the same. And I urge the council to reach out to local landowners about the climate emergency and about habitat improvement as well, because they're already doing so much and we should be working together more on that. So I commend this motion to members this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Colwell.
I just mentioned there's a badger cull as well that's been announced for West Berkshire, which is extremely disappointing.
As we said, we referred to the Environment Advisory Group. It will go then to the executive, which is a public meeting. So the debate, the investigation will be done by the panel, but the debate will be done in public. So, can we turn to item B, notice of motion B? I'll ask Councillor Alan Macro to move the motion, please.
I would like to move the motion in my name.
Okay. Does this find a seconder?
Happy to second, Chairman, and reserve my right.
Thank you. I recommend that the Council debates this motion on this evening in order to facilitate the discharge of business in accordance with Procedure Rule 4.9.8, and it's a very timely motion. Councillor Macro, would you like to speak, please? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to ask, what are we actually here for? And it seems obvious, but we're here to provide services and support for our residents. And I believe that this council should do the utmost to provide those services in ways that are appropriate for each resident.
Councillor Macro, sorry, can I ask you to put the microphone closer to your, so we can hear you?
Thank you. I don't usually have this problem, Mr. Chairman. I am very keen to make the most of modern technologies, such as the internet. These have the power to enable the council to provide services in a much more efficient way. Many residents, myself included, prefer to use the internet to access council services. However, there are many who are unable or not comfortable with using the internet. Some have conditions such as sight impairment or dyslexia that make it hard or impossible to use the internet. Others do not have access to or cannot afford high quality broadband. Some can only use pay-as-you-go mobile phones to access the internet, which have high cost data rates. Some residents don't have any way to access the internet because they don't have the particular devices and cannot travel easily to libraries. Using web applications and email is fine if you know exactly what you want. However, if you're not sure, it's best to speak to someone on the phone or call into the council offices. The council must, therefore, continue to allow our residents to contact it and request services by phone and in person. Direct debit is great for making regular payments to most people. However, some people are not comfortable with giving organisations the power to take money out of their bank accounts. Some want to be in control of when their account is debited, so they avoid going into the red. Some others would prefer to use their credit card so charges can be spread over a period. And some people don't even have a bank account, roughly 4% of adults nationally. The council must therefore continue to allow our residents to pay for services using, for example, debit and credit cards, as well as direct debit. We must recognise that our residents cover a wide range of ages and abilities. The council must cater for them all. I'm not just talking about the garden waste subscription. I'm talking about all public-facing council services. All should be available to those who can't or don't want to use the internet or direct debit to access or pay for council services. Let's make sure that we put the needs of our residents at the forefront of what we do. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Councillor Hilary Cole, can I invite you to speak, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to table an amendment to Councillor Macro's motion, which was circulated to all members this afternoon.
Is that amendment seconded?
I'd like to second, Chairman, reserve my rights.
Okay. All members should have seen that amendment text. Can I invite anyone who wants to speak to that amendment?
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst we're supportive of Councillor Macro's motion, we can't accept it as it stands, which is why we're proposing the amendment before you. Over the years, Do I not speak to the amendment?
Yes.
I was just indicating I want to speak later.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
You distracted me, Councillor Brooks. I thought you felt that you should be speaking at the moment. He is, that's right. Over the years, this Conservative administration has achieved significant improvements in the quality of service to our customers. When I first joined what is now the Customer First Programme Board in 2007, most systems were paper-based and transactions with residents were via the telephone, mail or face-to-face. Now, of course, 14 years later, things have changed, just as Councillor Macro has mentioned, not just for us in West Berkshire, but worldwide, as people become more used to conducting their transactions and life over the web. However, there are many council services where it will be inappropriate for them to be accessible to the public. Child protection and adult safeguarding issues are good examples of this. And there are many instances where online services have improved the customer experience. Our new Abritas system in housing is a good example, as is the Couth service, which helps children and young people with anxiety and other mental health and emotional health matters. And this is designed to be delivered remotely, and the users can remain anonymous if they want. And our report a problem service is excellent and certainly saves residents in the extremes of the district having to come into Market Street to report a pothole in Tilehurst or Lambourne. Having said that, we of course recognise that not all of our residents have access or are comfortable using online services. This doesn't just apply to the older generation, many of whom are tech savvy, but also those who are vulnerable or suffer deprivation, which is why people can still access services in a variety of ways, by letter, telephone, email, as well as the website. I'm a firm believer still in people needing to speak to people in certain circumstances, particularly when their situation is causing them distress or aggravation. Our call centre fields a high number of incoming calls for all services on a daily basis. For example, last month, over 28,000 transactions were processed. This included nearly 12,000 telephone calls via the switchboard. And of course, during the COVID pandemic, we were still open for business, even though it was conducted remotely. Although for obvious reasons, there was a restriction on personal payments during the pandemic. I'm assuming that Councillor Macro's motion is a result of the confusion around the payment of the annual subscription for the green waste collection service, although he says it's not. If people don't have access or don't want to pay by direct debit, they can make payment by calling our payment line or by visiting Market Street. But I must caution that we no longer accept payments in cash if residents choose to use either of these methods. As an authority, we are committed to excellence in customer service, and this is something I wholeheartedly subscribe to, which is why I believe that whoever picks up the phone in the authority, be it the janitor or the chief executive, should own the problem. And I'm pleased to tell you that we'll be launching a customer charter later this year, which will formalise this commitment. Chairman, I commend this amendment to Councillor Macro's motion to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Dillon.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. See, Jeff, if you don't use your hand in the right manner, you get bumped down the queue, sir. Thank you for the amendment, Councillor Cole. I think our concern with the wherever possible can also mean never being done. Because whenever possible, is a phrase that when you take that motion back into the operational side of the council can then completely negate the whole point of the motion. And so we had some concern around that wherever possible. However, I accept the examples you gave as being online services. However, I think where we would differentiate is, for example, if someone wasn't going through COOF, then we would still provide support to them. You would still reach out to them as a service and try to provide in-person support. You wouldn't just say, well, I'm sorry, because you don't engage online, we're not giving you any support. So I think you're extrapolating maybe one stage further on, which is the tool you're on about. We're not on about the tool because, like, in our manifesto, for example, we wanted to have a West Berkshire app. And so that will only be accessed via online. However, all of the services that we would put into an app would also have an area of person support by either an officer, or a counsellor. So I think that's where we were coming from. Thank you for the amendment, and I'm pleased to see that in general it seems to be finding some consensus in the chamber. Thanks.
Councillor Brooks.
I've been concerned and said so on many occasions about what I call digital exclusion. We talk about social exclusion. Well, what we mean, amongst other things, is the ability to access services. And we've talked about this for decades, making it easy for people to access our services. But I feel that this has to be a philosophy, and I'm not sure it is at the moment within this council. We should be wishing to have accessibility first and then ways of doing it second. I think sometimes we're drawn towards this efficient world of online to the detriment of people who cannot use it satisfactorily. Now, I managed to get by, but a lot of people don't. And they become so frustrated with technology, even if they have access to it, that they give up. And that's not a good outcome. It's good to hear that the contact centre will take calls. And I can see that, and I think we appreciate that there is some support for our broad point here in the original motion. But as my leader said, wherever possible is such an elastic term. And on the green bin charge, subscription, I won't use the other word for it this evening. It wasn't so much a nudge, Councillor Ardegh-Walter, as a full-on barge to say, we're only taking direct debits, or, you know, if we have to, maybe you could phone in. But honestly, the tone and the word music of that particular charge and going to direct debit almost brook no other way of doing so. It's a perfect example of where the department decided this would be really good for them, but not necessarily really good for the public. So I'm not sure what the mover of the amendment could do in terms of wherever possible. I wonder if there should be something within our reports that looks at the impact on a resident of the service we're outlining and bringing into being, so that it can be considered within that service in introduction, the accessibility of those services. And therefore it's regularly monitored, Councillor Cole, so that the wherever possible doesn't just flow, as my leader says, into custom and practice, except that it's different in different departments. It's actually monitored through the executive system. And then I think we might find that we were able to get on board with the amendment. But I finish by saying it has to be the way you want to operate, your philosophy. And if we don't see that at the moment, we see that your philosophy is let's push as much online as possible for the efficiency gain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Berwick.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we're in broad agreement here. There's no doubt about it that we're talking about what's best for our customers, for our residents. But Councillor Cole mentioned the Couth service. Now, this is a service that will never be delivered in person because of its nature. No child wants to go and meet a council officer to talk about their anxieties. So that's a great example, and it's not the only one. But I won't reel off a list of examples. But I would point out that we're all talking here from a certain perspective. But you know, we've got growing up now a generation of digital natives, and as time goes by, there will be less and less and less demand for the types of payments, the types of contacts that we're discussing. So I think it's absolutely necessary that we have some kind of some degree of elasticity. And what I'm absolutely certain is if we make a commitment to provide personal contact where possible or where appropriate, that if council doesn't do that, you will let us know, won't you?
Councillor Ardegh-Walter.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to, as per my brief, sort of respond briefly to some of the comments that have been very narrowly focused at the garden waste service. And of course, this is one of, if not the most high-profile services, which is both voluntary, non-obligatory as per council tax, and also involves payment. Firstly, I'd like to say I'm glad that we appear to share a philosophical underpinning with members opposite. Without trying to go too deeply into that, we all agree, as Councillor Cole has very, very amply said, that we want to be customer-led. We want to enable residents of this district to pay for council services by whatever is the best means for them, acknowledging Councillor Burke's point that some services are not appropriate. However, with regards to garden waste, there was no desire to produce a hyper-efficient, really good whiz-bang technological solution by forcing everybody into direct debits, as Councillor Brooks was saying. The reality is, and fairly candidly here, members, we were forced into this decision reluctantly because of a vendor issue, which meant that because the great majority of garden waste subscriptions have to be taken over a narrow window, we didn't have any confidence that, in particular, credit card payments could reliably be taken over that interval without causing online chaos. And again, to refer back to one of Councillor Cole's points, that wherever possible is exactly there to counter, to handle this type of operational issue. Absolutely, we share the desire, the philosophy, but I'm afraid when technology and computers come together, as Councillor Brooks knows very well, sometimes things don't work in time. So in short, we were forced, regrettably, to ask the great majority of residents to make payments via direct debit, which they have, I should add. The great majority of residents, compared with last year's numbers, have already either signed up with direct debit or via the contact centre on credit card, by cheque in some cases, though very few, or again, using direct debit via the customer contact centre. So the great majority of residents have, however, unideally been served, for which we're glad. We, and I in particular, are very determined that for next year's season, we will offer credit card payments in particular via online, as well as, again, for over the telephone for people who are unable to do so. So again, we're philosophically aligned, and I look forward to a rising standard of service and choices for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Water. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I brought in sympathy with the amendment as well as, of course, the main motion, but I was concerned when Councillor Cole mentioned that we won't, I think what she was saying, I didn't note down the exact words, but she implied that there will be cases where we can't take payment in cash. Now, I know the amount of cash transactions has reduced enormously recently, but I do know people who still, including my sister, bless her, who will use cash on every occasion. There's a great lack of trust in banks and in the online system. It's unfortunate, and there are going to be people, I think, for many years that need to use cash. So I would hope that the word possible encompasses the word legal, and I hope that the law for some years will make it illegal for organisations to refuse to accept cash for essential universal services. Perhaps the monitoring officer can respond to that. I'm afraid the amendment was only brought to my notice very late and I haven't done the research.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Alan Law.
Thank you, Chairman.
So I think in terms of cash payments, it's my understanding that cash payments can be made via the bank. So although the facility for cash payments to the council offices were removed when the cash office was removed, but actually residents can still go to the banks to make payments and the post office. So that facility to use cash hasn't been removed.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that clarification. I accept that you can still pay the council in cash via banks and post office.
Thank you, Chairman. We're having one of my favourite expressions tonight. I think we're having a violent agreement in the council, and we're homing in on a few little semantics here. There are services that can only be delivered one way, and of course, therefore, you have to have something to have a watertight motion. It has to have the word somewhere, wherever possible. I'm more concerned, both the motion and the amendment are really focusing on the means of communication. I must say, I'm more concerned about, once you do get through, the message, the content. I have personal experience a few weekends ago trying to report broken traffic lights. Called the out of hours service. And of course, if you've done it recently, you get a choice of press one button for one thing. The top one is lost dogs. There isn't a button to press for anything to do with highways, whether it's an accident, tree falling down, or traffic lights. So I think somewhere along the line, I'm totally supportive of this amendment. But somewhere along the line, I think we've got to step back from a customer service point of view and start looking at what the actual interface, interaction, and the message is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chairman. To a certain extent, Councillor Law's stolen some of my words, but members virtually opposite may not be surprised that I've had a slight hand in the wording of the proposed amendment. And the difficulty that I had with the wording of the motion as it stood was that it read, Council therefore resolves, included, Council therefore resolves that all services should be accessible to residents in person. Well, I'm sorry, but as we've just explained, that's an impossibility. So some words had to be inserted to give a caveat that not all services could be accessible in person. That's the reason for the words. I accept there's some difficulty possibly with those words, but searching for a phrase to insert that put that caveat in is quite difficult, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Chairman. There have been some technology failures here this evening. One thing I have learned over the last couple of years is that if you get in the way of a councillor's microphone, it's the worst thing you could possibly do. So as long as there's alternatives to people being able to communicate and pay, then I think that would be perfectly acceptable. The other point that I think is worth making here is that, Councillor Cole, I wonder whether it would be possible to have some sort of impact report in council, or impact assessment in council reports to say, is this something that the different payment methods could have any bearing on for this particular service? I think that might go a long way to perhaps reassure everybody that that the impact is minimal or has been considered. Thank you.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairman. I hadn't actually intended to speak because I think we are agreeing, but there was just a couple of points I wanted to pick up on. Just on your point, Councillor Pattenden, we have a huge list of KPIs, and actually OSMC looked through those KPIs and decided what wanted to be reported and what didn't want to. So there then potentially may be customer service ones in there, and if it's something that we feel is important, we can look at whether they come up that ranking. But there is a huge list that will look at all of those elements. So if it's something that we want to look at bringing forward, we can certainly look at doing that, because we change those KPIs as we feel they're progressing and everything else. So just on that point. The other point I just wanted to go back to was you, Councillor Brooks. I know you sort of questioned the philosophy, and I think we're all agreeing here. We recognise that technology moves on. You very much have to enable all of it. We have to enable people to interact with us online. We have to enable people to ring, and we have to enable people to enact with us face to face. I'm really pleased with what we've done over the last 18 months, because I know that this council, West Berkshire Council here, was one of the last public services to close. We were the last ones to actually close the front doors during the pandemic, and we were one of the very first as a public service that everybody is entitled to access to reopen our doors. So West Berkshire Council's got a really good record of enabling that, and I would entirely support the words from Councillor Cole. I think we're all agreeing. We recognise that we need to make sure that customers come first and customers are able to interact with the council as they see fit. So very happy to support thanking Councillor Macro for bringing that motion, but very happy to support the amendment to enable us all to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. As has been pointed out by a number of people, the motion proposed ignores some of the practical issues encountered by council officers, and this amendment seeks to address these areas. I rather thought that green waste might come up, so I took the precaution against some statistics. By yesterday, i.e. September the 8th, the council has successfully processed 27,810 property requests. This represents 92% of the whole of the 2020-21 year, and the waste team are confident of surpassing last year's figures. 99% have paid by direct debit, meaning only 88 people have paid by credit card and 172 by cheque. Credit card payments were paid using the contact centre to a well-publicised number. Alternatively, residents can come to Market Street and pay direct. Clearly, the system seems to be working, but we are all concerned about those who are digitally dispossessed. I have had only one person complaining, a senior citizen who is anxious to keep control of her expenditure and dislikes direct debits, even though residents are provided with written advice well in advance of the payment date. She set up a direct debit, but her workaround was to cancel it as soon as it was paid. We are all sympathetic to Councillor Macro's motion, but this amendment clarifies matters and I hope we will pass it.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Brooks, I see you've raised your hand. You have already spoken. Yeah.
I know I have. I wanted to suggest an amendment to the amendment, which I think is perfectly reasonable at any time.
No,
And would-
once an amendment has been moved and seconded, that needs to be disposed of before a further alternative amendment can be moved.
Defeat this and then retake it as an amendment.
Would you let me just say one word? Well, one sentence.
Under the procedure rules, a member is allowed to speak once. The procedure is also clear that only one amendment can be tabled and dealt with at a time.
Yeah. Let us
I know that.
Let us deal with this first, and then we'll come back to you.
You need flexibility in meetings.
Can I invite Councillor Henry Cole to?
Thank you, Chairman. I understand, before I wrap up, I just a comment to Councillor Brooks. I do understand his frustration, but we do have a constitution, Councillor Brooks, and you have been a long-standing member on and off of this organisation. So I do feel that you're being slightly.
Had you listened, you'd have heard something that would have carried.
Well, just can I just carry on, Chairman? I note Councillor Brooks' comments with regard to the impact and also Councillor Pattenden's reiteration of Councillor Brooks' comments about accessibility and the impact on services, and also Councillor Law's comments, which I think are extremely valid. And therefore, I propose to take these suggestions, these comments, to the Customer First Programme Board for consideration, so that we can look at how we can include these in our future reports. I can't promise that anything will happen at the moment because it is just come forward tonight, but I will certainly pursue it with the Customer First Programme Board, and Andy Sharp, the Executive Director who chairs the Customer First Programme Board, is here tonight, so he has heard the debate, and I think they're worthwhile comments. I think we are, as Councillor Law says, in violent agreement about this, and I personally passionately believe in good quality customer service, and we have always got to never to cease striving to ensure that all our customers, including those disadvantaged ones, are not disenfranchised, which is why we continue to offer a variety of methods of accessing our services. Thank you.
Point of order. I am in no doubt that in this chamber, over the years, an amendment such as this has been amended, because I have reached out to Graham Jones and others over the years and said, if you could change that word to that, we'd accept it. And he said, yes, I will. Now, I don't know where this is coming from, that you can't amend an amendment, but we certainly have in this chamber within living memory. And I was not allowed to even suggest something. So you got it totally wrong, because it's happened over many years. And all I wanted to ask was, would you put something in wherever possible? We take a presumption that these services can be provided in many ways as per the points below, but there will clearly be some that cannot. That is all I was going to ask you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Macro. Sorry.
Chairman, Councillor Jeffrey has his hand raised. So I don't know whether it's a point of order.
It is.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make the point very, very vigorously. I know that Councillor Brooks has just made it, but I want to reinforce it. You can amend an amendment. That is something that you can do. That is not replacing one amendment with another amendment. It is taking the wording of an amendment, proposing an amendment to it, and then the council resolves that matter. And if it resolves that it includes the amended amendment, then that becomes the substantive amendment. It is pretty basic operation of a council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey.
Knew it.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just respond, I can't speak to the examples that have been cited. If in the past the administration has moved a proposal which the opposition has requested a minor change to, then that is entirely appropriate that the mover of the original recommendation can accept a minor amendment to that. But the Constitution is explicit, and I am perfectly clear. I am responsible for advising this meeting this evening. The Constitution is clear that one amendment can be moved at a time, and that needs to be disposed of before any further amendments are considered. If this amendment that's currently tabled is not carried, then a further amendment can be proposed if members wish to do so. In fact, a further amendment could be proposed in any event, even if this is carried and becomes the substantive motion. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Clark. Councillor Macro, in closing the debate on the amendment, do you have any final words?
So we're still speaking on the amendment?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I share Councillor Dillon's concerns and other people's concerns about the words wherever possible, because it's a little bite in due course we often hear these days. It's very much can be, I'm sure it wasn't intended to be, but it can be very much a get out. So I think if we accept that, we're probably making the best of a bad job, but I would have preferred something along the lines of Councillor Brooks' suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I will now ask Sarah Clark to conduct an indicative vote on the amendment by raising of Zoom hands with those of you who are in attendance in the chamber and also via Zoom. This will ensure that the views of those councillors, whether physically present or not, are noted. Could you?
Thank you, Chairman. And can I just note that Councillor Jeffrey's hand, I think, has remained raised since he raised the point of order. So if I can, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I think that we have 28 votes in favour of the proposed, 27 votes in favour of the proposed amendment. Can I? It's now reduced. Sorry, I think it's now okay. So if I can ask people to bear with me, because the number of votes is changing as I speak.
Right, it seems to have stabilised.
So that's 27 in favour. So that appears to be a clear majority. But I will ask any members who wish to oppose this proposed amendment. So if I can ask everyone to put down their hand. So I've still got two hands raised, Councillor Simpson and Longton. So Councillor Longton, can you please, thank you. So can I please ask anyone opposed to the motion to please raise to So anyone opposed to the proposed amendment, can you please raise your Zoom hand? Thank you. I can't see anyone opposed. Does anyone wish to abstain from the proposed amendment? If you can raise your Zoom hand.
Just testing the system, Chairman. I'm abstaining. Wasn't sure we were going to get that far.
No.
I can see your hand.
So there are 3 members who've indicated a wish to abstain. So, Chairman, I can confirm that the indicative vote would be to find support for the proposed amendment. And if we can now move to the formal vote
I
of
propose an amendment to the amendment.
But it's not been disposed of yet, because we need a formal vote of members in the chamber. So once that's been done, then we can move to a second.
Thank you.
So thank you. So if I can ask members within the council chamber to now indicate whether they are for, against, or wish to abstain from the proposed amendment. Okay. 23. Have I got 23 votes? Sorry, I'm just, there appear to be 23 votes cast, but I believe we have 22 members in the chamber, so there is an anomaly.
The 23, including Andy.
No.
Some votes are worth more than others.
There's 13 from the administration, 8 from the Lib Dem.
Yeah, there's 23 altogether.
Oh, apologies. Apologies. That's my maths and a long day. Apologies. So, Chairman, I can confirm that proposed amendment has been approved and carried. So that now becomes the substantive motion under consideration.
Okay. Where do we go from here?
So I don't know if Councillor Brooks wishes to.
Right, Councillor Brooks, do you wish to? I think that's an old hand.
I was told, Chairman, and I'd like to move an amendment. And I'd like to simply say, Council therefore resolves, if you look at the amendment, there will be a presumption that all services should be accessible to residents in person or by phone, as well as online, and payments by residents for council services should be permitted by cheque or by credit or debit card, in person or by phone, as well as via all forms of online banking, unless it is clear that such access can only be achieved by online services. So there's a presumption. Now that's a clear steer, not to us in this chamber, Chairman, because I believe we do have a real agreement.
Right. 5.5 past.
Very good. But what it does, it sends a steer to our paid service to say this council will presume you can deliver these services unless you can't. And that's a clear distinction from wherever possible, which is so subjective that any officer could drive a coach and horses through it if he wanted to, or she wanted to.
Does that?
I'll second the.
You'll second that. Okay.
Point of order, Chairman.
Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Brooks, I wasn't clear on whether the words you read out, I tried to follow the words you read out, and it sounded like it was an amendment to the original motion, not to the amended motion. Could you just clarify for me, please?
Absolutely. I'm looking at the amendment, Councillor Bridgman, and I would delete the words wherever possible, which are in red. I would replace them with there will be a presumption. So that's a new phrase. Then the 2 bullet points remain the same as per the amendment. And then a new sentence to wrap it up says, unless it is clear that such access by residents can only be delivered through online services.
Is that clear, Councillor Berkshire?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Brooks.
Mr. Chairman, I haven't reserved my right to speak, and I've got no intention of it. It's fine. I don't need to wait to come back in. I think that what Councillor Brooks's amendment does do is actually acknowledges the points that Councillor Bowick made in the debate, which are quite correct. You know, things like the COOF service is designed to be delivered online. You know, but you also have other support there as well, and it's that clear. As Councillor Brooks says, it's that clear indication to the public that we're always putting you first, you know, unless it's a digital service. And then obviously that has to be online.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. I see no hands from members wishing to speak. So do we move this to straight to a vote?
Yes, unless Councillor Brooks, so the closing order on a proposed amendment is the mover of the proposed amendment and then the mover of the original motion, which is Councillor Macro.
So yes, I'm happy just to ask the administration to.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cole has raised her hand.
Chairman, thank you. And thank you for the amendment, Councillor Brooks. I think we're splitting hairs here, and in order to move things on, I'm happy to accept your proposed amendment.
I'm grateful for that. And in summing up, I don't think I have much more to add. I don't think we are splitting hairs. I think we're giving a direct sort of steer to our officers. And I look forward to support across the chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Macro, do you wish to say anything further?
Just that I think with this, the Councillor Brooks amendment, I think we end up with exactly what we all want, Mr. Chairman. And it certainly is an improvement both on my original and on the administration's amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Masters, you've raised your hand.
I don't know whether it's a point of order or a point of information request, really. Maybe if in the future, when there's something that we all kind of agree on, but it's just down to a little bit of language and nuance, maybe a little bit more closer working between the different parties would, you know, make for a smoother flow through the procedure of the meeting. And, you know, just a suggestion.
Thank you. Right. I propose now that we move to a vote on Councillor Brooks' amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. So we will be conducting an indicative vote to enable all members who are attending virtually or in the chamber. So if I could ask members to raise their hands in support of the tabled amendment. Thank you. That's 32 are supporting this. Can I ask all members to now take their Zoom hands down? Councillor Longton. Okay. So can I ask any members who are opposed to the proposed amendment, can they raise their Zoom hands now? And there appears to be no opposition, Chairman. And are there finally any members who wish to abstain from voting in respect of the proposed amendment? No hands have been raised, Chairman. So the indicative vote indicates that the majority of members of council would support the proposed amendment. And I would now ask that we move to a formal vote by members in the chamber in respect of the proposed amendment.
Chairman, Councillor Royce's microphone has just gone dead.
I can record it. Do you wish to support? Thank you. Okay, so Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that proposed amendment has been carried unanimously by members in the chamber, and that now becomes the substantive item to be disposed of.
So now, members, we have a changed substantive motion. Can I ask if anyone wants to speak on this motion? Councillor Brooks.
You'll recall I reserve my right as seconder.
Yeah, I think if we could just check that there's nobody else before we move to the closing order of debate.
I raised my hand, Mr. Chairman, but to ask that we move to the vote, and I think that the debate was had during the amendments, obviously subject to the seconder having his right to sum up.
I think you're being asked to make it brief, Councillor Brooks.
Honestly, where's that independent chair? I'm not going to spend too long. I'm grateful to the administration. I think we've come out with a good solution. I would say with Couth, and I don't know much about it, Councillor Burke, but you've got to ask yourself, and don't tell me now, but what did we do before we had online? There was an ability to engage with young people who had issues. And in terms of the green bin tax, subscription charge, Councillor Ardagh-Walter, I'm grateful for your comments on that as well, but I do wish, and maybe we need to look at how you communicate with us, because all of that could have been said to us as we were pushing back to Kofi saying, why on earth are you being so strong on the direct debits? So communication is all, information is wonderful, and thank you very much for your support to the amended amendment. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Williston, do you have anything to add in closing?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Macro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's all been said. Thank you very much.
Okay. Members, I will now ask the monitoring officer to conduct the vote.
So thank you. If I can ask all members to raise their Zoom hands whilst we conduct an indicative vote. So all who are in favour of the now substantive motion. Thank you. That's I have 31 in favour, 33. So that's a clear majority in favour. I will, however, ask if anyone wishes to have their vote noted. If I can ask all members to take their hands down. Thank you. And then if anyone is opposed, if they could raise their Zoom hand. I can see no hands raised. And then if anyone wishes to abstain. No, so that Chairman is a clear majority of members of council who would support this motion. And I would now ask that members in the council chamber use their microphone system to indicate their formal vote in favour or against accordingly.
Chairman, just to point it.
And thank you. Yes. So, Chairman, I can confirm that a motion has been carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members, for your forbearance through that long and complicated process, but I think we got to the right place in the end. Can I move there quickly to item 16, which is members' questions? I'd like to thank those members who have submitted questions for this evening's meeting. Your questions will appear on the screen and be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. And of course, you'll be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question. Can we have question A displayed, please? And can I ask Councillor Ross McKinnon to respond, please?
Thanks for your question, Councillor Carver. The answer is yes. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you for your brevity.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Brett. Yes, that took me by surprise as well. Question B. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Councillor Masters. During the period referred to, the council has had to issue 2 such letters. One of those resulted in the subsequent service of a community protection notice under the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014, and there's been no further action related to the second. The process following such matters will depend on the facts and the particular circumstances of the case. The council continues to take steps to secure the removal of content that is defamatory or otherwise abusive to staff, or where posts have been given rise to safeguarding concerns, and it is entirely right that it does so. In terms of members, it is appropriate for action to be taken against any individual who publishes inappropriate content about any councillor. Members should not be subjected to intimidation or abuse on social media, and a failure to address this appropriately will result in a less diverse cohort of members, particularly as women are statistically more likely to be subject to intimidation and abuse. Thank you, Jim. Go on supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor Willison. Of the 2, were they against the council or individual elected members?
I'm afraid I don't know, Councillor Master. I can find out and let you know.
Thank you, Councillor Masters. Question C from Councillor Abbs. Again, Councillor Wollaston, please.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. The competitive tendering process is currently in progress. It is being conducted by Alliance Leisure, who have been appointed to do this work through the UK Leisure Framework Agreement. As mentioned in answer to a previous question, tenders are due to be returned by October the 8th, and an executive decision is planned for November the 18th to consider the award of the contract. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Wollaston. So does the portfolio holder not agree that given the executive's stated aim of a new sports hub being completed by March 2022, something promised to Sport England and is a major reason behind the withdrawal of the objection to the Faraday Road Football Club application, that not providing details to other members, not involving ward members in any of this process, given that the Monks Lane development will have a very large impact on the residents of my ward and the other members that represent that ward, that by not doing so, by not involving people, by making us ask questions in the format that we're having to ask the questions, i.e. in public like this, that we're failing the most basic scrutiny test. And it drives conspiracy theories, which we don't really need to drive. So would you agree with me on what I've said, please?
I'm afraid I wouldn't, Councillor Abbs. We undertook a very detailed consultation exercise, which included a webinar, which I took part in. Clearly, the planning process is going through now, which gives another opportunity for both members and opponents to have their say. I think we've done the most we can.
Sorry, okay, you mentioned opponents there. I didn't know nobody mentioned opponents. It was ward members I was referring to.
Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Worston, would you like to respond to Councillor Pattenden's question number D?
Thank you, Councillor Paddenden. The Council's ambition has always been to complete the development by March 2022. However, this timescale is influenced by the planning determination and the decision of Sport England, which is a statutory consultee for the planning application. We continue to monitor progress with the planning process and will review if necessary. Do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you. You'll be aware as well that there's well-reported shortages of materials, haulage and staff affecting the building trade. Are these likely to affect your proposed timescales?
I'm afraid I can't say. I mean, I'm well aware of these shortages, clearly. But it depends on whether the contractor, whether they're selected, can sort themselves out or not, I suppose.
Thank you, Councillor Pattenden. Question E is from Councillor Brooks.
Thank you.
Councillor Wollaston as well.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. The Council's allocated a sinking fund of £25,000 per annum to cover lifetime replacement but is keeping this figure under review in light of increasing inflationary costs. Do you have a supplementary?
That's helpful. Can you just remind me what the lifespan is considered to be, please?
About 10 years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Macro has submitted question F, again for Councillor Williston.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. The Council has not completed any negotiations with Sport England, as we do not require their approval for the Newbury Sports Hub. Sport England is a statutory consultee in relation to the Sport Hub development and made their decisions in accordance with National Planning Policy Framework. Do you have a supplementary?
Does that mean there were no formal or informal discussions with Sport England about the hub?
We are always in discussion with Sport England about all matters sport. So yes, of course, we had discussions with them, but about all the play and pitch strategy as well.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Question G from Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. The Council has received queries in respect of existing electoral arrangements in 3 parishes in addition to Greenham Parish. 2 queries related to the total number of councillors representing the parish councils, and the other related to a parish where there is no current parish council. As I've previously confirmed to you, the Council is looking at the issue on a district-wide basis. I can confirm that a project manager has now been appointed and has started work with the Electoral Services Manager to review the community governance arrangements. As we discussed, I'm hopeful that this work will be completed by the 2023 local elections. But if this proves impractical, we will, if possible, look at Sandalford Ward as an individual case. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, through you, Chairman. Yes, I do. I'm grateful for that answer. It's quite somewhat reassuring, but I'm sure the monitoring officer is aware of paragraph 27 in the guidelines. But would you not agree that in this case, referring to that paragraph, whilst it is normal to undertake a review of the whole district, there are exceptional circumstances where serious anomalies can be addressed on an individual basis, and that this is a serious enough anomaly to actually affect the reputational, to cause reputational damage if it's not addressed?
I understand where your thoughts, Councillor Vickers. Just to repeat, we are reasonably confident that we can achieve this on a district-wide scale. But if not, then we will consider looking at Sandalford on an individual case. I'm well aware of the problems that there are with this particular ward.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Vickers. Question H is from Councillor Dillon to Councillor Williston.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. WBC has a single contract to operate the leisure centres. As such, we get accounts for the full contract covering 7 leisure centres. The accounts up to June 30th, 2019 can be supplied at the next meeting of the Kennet JAC. The receipt of accounts from our contractors since then have been impacted by the COVID pandemic. We are waiting for these accounts to be finalised, subject to the completion of audits. I understand that your colleague, Councillor Jeremy Cottam, who chairs the JAC, is fully aware of this. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you for the answer. I think that, would you agree that particularly bodies like this, where we have a commercial organisation running it in partnership with the council, that it's important that members have full transparency of those documents in order to carry out their scrutiny process, and that the delay of budget papers, which obviously triggered this question, is not helpful to that process.
Yeah, absolutely accept that, but I think you have to appreciate, I'm sure you understand, that leisure centres were particularly impacted by the virus.
Thank you. Question I, submitted by Councillors Phil Barnett and Billy Drummond to Councillor Sander.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to allow Councillor Williston to have a sip of drink. Thank you, councillors, for your question. I think without seeing published legislation, it's almost impossible to provide a comprehensive response. Policy regarding the use of front gardens for off-street parking can be considered as part of the local plan review and transport plan review, but it must also be balanced with the need for biodiversity and climate change. Front gardens provide a valuable resource and prevent surface water flooding, which is lost when front gardens are given over to parking. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. As you quite rightly say, next year we will see government regulations regarding footpath parking, and obviously it will be up to this council to make a judgment whether to implement the regulations. But of course, many local roads and cul-de-sacs will become very narrow if it is the case. Do you agree that the council should encourage as much as possible, bearing in mind that the big concern will be is access of emergency vehicles and our own refuge carts?
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. I think it's difficult to support something which may be required by a resident and may not be desired or accepted or liked by the residents either side. You know, it's not always something which is nice to look out of your front window and see cars parked outside it. Let's put it that way. I think we need to look at that, and I'm quite content that when the legislation comes forward, we will discuss that in the Transport Advisory Group.
We've lost you, Councillor Sumner.
Oh, hello. Hello.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
You can now, yes.
Right, I've turned my camera off. Sorry about that, Chairman. And I clearly I have no idea how much of that you actually heard. So what I was saying, Chairman, is that we will discuss any legislation that comes out through the Transport Advisory Group. I think that's the sensible place to have an open conversation about it. I'm quite keen to see any legislation that comes out about verge parking and the issues that are created by that. And of course, paramount importance will be access for not only emergency vehicles, but for our Veolia trucks and the likes to get down streets as well, of course, because if they can't get down there, then all of our services become questioned.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. Question J is submitted by Councillor Culver for response by Councillor Water.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Culver. 40% of parish and town councils in the district have attended the Parish Climate Forum since it was set up in May. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Councillor Water. Yeah, could you outline for me a bit more about how you are hoping to encourage more parish councils to get involved in this, and can we involve members of this chamber in encouraging their parish councils to take part? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Culver. So answering the second part of your question first, I'd be delighted if you and indeed other members know of any councils, as in parish or town councils, who have not to date been happy to volunteer, to attend. It is worth pointing out that every single parish has been contacted. Many are extremely small, and the ask on members of a small committee is understandably quite high when there are obviously many other commitments. So again, we'd be delighted to spread the word both through to parishes and indeed community groups where they're known. So please, the more the merrier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Water. Councillor Wollaston, could you respond to question K from Councillor Masters, please?
Thank you, Councillor Masters. Officers would only review social media outside the council's own accounts in limited circumstances. For example, consumer protection. The public protection team have responsibility to enforce a range of consumer protection legislation, which means that where relevant, they will review social media accounts linked to a matter under investigation or inappropriate content. If the council receives a complaint about material posted on social media that relates to the business of the council, that will be reviewed as appropriate in accordance with the relevant complaints procedure. I can confirm that the actual time spent undertaking such activities is extremely limited. Do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Masters. Councillor Abbs for Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. Net carbon zero focuses on two main sources of carbon: operational energy use and embodied carbon. The main principles of net carbon zero are to reduce construction impacts, reduce operational energy use, increase renewable energy supply, and finally consider offsetting any remaining carbon. Net carbon zero at present does not have a universal standard. but rather several toolkits and bodies that assess a building's potential to be net carbon zero over its lifetime. West Berkshire Council have chosen to adopt the traditional industry standard of BREEAM on Newbury Sports Hub, along with most local authorities. The building overall will achieve BREEAM Very Good, and the operational energy use of the building will achieve the BREEAM Excellent standard. I can confirm that environmental issues were confirmed to the design team as of crucial importance from the very start. They are still working out the detailed design, but expect to be not quite net carbon zero, so we propose to achieve this through carbon offsetting. Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I just am very little surprised at that because BREEAM Excellent all round should have been our target. But the main issue I saw was in the planning, and I'd like you to confirm that there is in fact no solar at all on this new facility.
Thank you. The original brief was to try and get to BREEAM Excellent, and the advice from the consultants, it was almost impossible to achieve on this building for a variety of reasons. In terms of the lack of solar, the issue is the orientation of the building. It goes north-south, and I'm informed by consultants that that doesn't really meet the ideal standards for solar.
Well, for reference, it's about 1.5% difference.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Pattenden to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
Thank you, Councillor Pattenden. And thanks for your question. Now, I've got a lot of respect for Councillor Pattenden, as I hope he knows, but I completely reject the premise of this question. The suggestion that the Council has not fully considered alternative views is wholly wrong. We're fully aware of those views, but there's competing views and interests regarding what happens to that piece of land and the wider London Road estate, most notably the long-term economic interests of the residents of West Berkshire as a whole. It's a logical fallacy to assume, as I think he does here, that because the Council decides to proceed in a different direction to that wished by those mentioned, that their views have not been considered. They have been. Now, Councillor Pattenden mentions the community football group. Now, for my part, I have in the past attempted to engage with that group in good faith, but the only outcome of that was to receive rather nasty abuse from that group's social media pages, aimed both at me personally and also towards my executive colleagues. It's not reasonable to expect members or officers of the Council to continue with discussions in that climate. That said, more recently, I know that Councillor Williston has met with representatives of the community football group, and only this week I had a very good and constructive meeting with Councillor Miller of Newbury Town Council and the community football group, who we've previously heard from this evening. So I hope this heralds the beginning of a less hostile approach towards the Council. I'd be very happy if that was the case. But even then, there can be no guarantee that the Council will in the future wholly satisfy the wishes of that group, the opposition and indeed the ward members. That is simply the nature of decision-making when there are stakeholders whose interests and wishes are in conflict. But to return to my original statement, the Council will always consider differing views, but ultimately will make what we feel is the best decision, which balances those demands in the best interests of West Berkshire as a district. Do you have a supplementary?
I do.
Sorry, microphone trouble. I think it's back on now. Thanks for your answer, Councillor McKinnon, and respect is mutual. But from the many questions put forward by opposition councillors, the Newbury Community Football Group, and even Conservative councillors in this chamber regarding the temporary or permanent reopening of Faraday Road, the pitch there, since the ground was closed 3 years ago, can you see from our perspective how we feel the views of opposition councillors, the NCFG and the public, are not being fully considered?
I can understand why those whose views are ultimately not adopted by the Council might be frustrating, but I do think it's unfair and far too much of a stretch to say that the views are not considered.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Pattenden. Councillor McKinnon, could you continue to the question N asked by Councillor Tony Vickers?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Vickers. The work being carried out now is estate-wide, high level, and covers the key areas of transport, flooding, drainage, contamination, noise, air quality, and historical significance. This is part of an iterative process resulting in production of an environmental statement which must accompany any future planning application. Now, some aspects are likely to be more challenging, like flooding, and therefore may require further studies going forward in order to seek different mitigation options. Other aspects might be found to be of little to no risk, like archaeology, and therefore might need no further work than that being carried out now. I can assure you that any outline application will not be considered without an appropriate environmental statement, itself the product of significant ongoing work. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. I'm somewhat pleased to hear that, Councillor McKinnon. But would it be possible for myself as the shadow planning spokesperson to have sight of the terms of reference given to the consultant on this, so that would give me more reassurance? Is this a public document? I think it might have to wait till the planning application in normal circumstances, but this isn't really a normal circumstance in that it is council-owned land.
In principle, I'm happy to share with you as the planning spokesman any documents that my legal advisors and the officers feel appropriate. But in principle, I think if you allow me to discuss that further offline.
Just wish to respond constructively to that.
Fine, that's fine. Thanks, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor McKinnon, could you respond to the question O from Councillor Abbs, please?
Yes, of course, Chairman. This question reads just a wee bit strangely, but I'm assuming you're asking who will own the leasehold and freehold at the sports hub. That land deal was extensively detailed in the executive report on the 29th of April. But to remind you of those details, the council will own the built assets for the duration of its leasehold interest, which is 40 years. On the termination of the lease, the land and the fixed assets will revert to the landlords, which at present is Newbury Rugby Club. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor McKinnon. Given that there are multi-millions of pounds to be spent on the building of this facility, does Councillor McKinnon believe that, or can he demonstrate rather, that there is actually better value in building this new asset in this current location and then handing it over to a third party rather than just building the same facility down at the Faraday roadside?
I think that's the dictionary definition of new information, but I'll take advice on that one.
Does that count?
Yeah, I think it's an entirely different subject.
Yes, I think you have changed the subject on this. It's not that you didn't respond to the answer given to you.
If I may, Chairman, I asked who would own the asset, which was clearly answered that the rugby club, and then I supplemented by referring to a fair opinion from the said councillor as to whether that money would have been better spent the same money in a different location. It's directly connected to who owns the asset. So I'm not sure how it's completely different information.
I'll just respond, Chairman, by saying that asking to compare and contrast a facility at Faraday Road when the original question related to the ownership of leasehold and freehold at Monks Lane is, in my opinion, a different subject. So I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Wollaston. Question P, please.
Thank you, Councillor Abbs. The simple answer is no. The building had no built asset value, and insurance protection was limited to public liability in order to protect the council from any personal accident and injury claimed by persons injured whilst attempting to break into the property illegally. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you very much for that answer. In a previous meeting, a similar question was answered in that it was self-insured. Could you please explain the difference between the two answers?
I'm afraid I'm not an insurance expert, Councillor Abbs. I'd need to come back to you on that.
Well, I guess then, Chairman, how do we find out why are we getting one answer from one executive member at one meeting and a different at another?
Councillor Wollaston, can you provide a written version?
With pleasure.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
And finally, question Q, also from Councillor Abbs to Councillor Wollaston.
So just to make a note of, so I don't forget this. Right. Thank you again, Councillor Abbs. The council has engaged extensively with the community regarding the proposals for the sports facilities in West Berkshire. The council has also been in regular communication with Sport England regarding the same. The playing pitch strategy was approved by council in February 2020 after extensive public consultation. It provides for annual meetings between the council and Sport England. The first of these was postponed because of COVID and is now taking place next month. The council has operational meetings with officers in respect of delivering key schemes, which are frequently part 2 and include commercially sensitive information. It would not be practical for all party members to be invited to such meetings or appropriate for minutes to be circulated. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, can you confirm that the people you speak to at Sport England includes a gentleman called Bob Sharples, who I've also spoken with, who clearly indicates and has shown me information from Councillor Lynn Doherty, basically giving assurances on various schedules, etc., and that he has stated a preference for cross-party representatives to be discussing with them, not just those in control, just in case there is a change in the future, which we hope will happen.
That's never been passed across to us, I'm afraid, Councillor Ebbs.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hodge, Councillor Williston.
Sorry, I do know Bob Sharples.
Thank you. That, members, brings us to the end of our formal business. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and close this meeting. Could I ask all panellists to remain seated, remain in the virtual PT room until the host has confirmed that the meeting is no longer being streamed.